Good morning, I'm Lorraine Weaver. I'm Head of Biological Sciences here at Worcester University. And first I must apologise for not being with you in person today. But I'd like to tell you about a scheme that we have developed in order to help disabled students doing their practical work. And this is called our Personal Demonstrator scheme. This arose because about 2 years ago we suddenly had 3 students in the first year with autistic spectrum disorders. One quite severe, the others not quite so severe. This was brand new to us. We'd had lots of students with physical disabilities and we were really very good at handling those and making their student experience as good as possible. But this was a whole new kettle of fish for us. The students concerned, 2 of them had support workers with them, organised by our central disability unit, but it was still a whole new set of problems that had appeared, and I was very interested in why these had appeared, why this was such a new problem. And it seems that these were the first students to have gone through mainstream schooling with these quite severe problems, and therefore they had developed the same sort of expectations as their peers in terms of going on to higher education. Therefore, this was a problem which, although involves only very few students, is actually going to continue. So we needed something which we could use over the next few years in order to help these students. And the big problems that we faced were during the practical work. And we do a lot of practical work in biology. I would think on average 3 hours of our 4-hour sessions involve practical work. So this was a major problem which became apparent very early on. These students were having big problems understanding what to do and carrying out the practical work. And I tend to teach first year students in here, which is our Darwin lab, which holds 75 students safely for practical work. For that number we would have 2 members of staff here and possibly 2 technical assistants as well. But it did mean that while I was tied up with 1 student, there were 74 of them and 1 student, 1 other member of staff dashing around trying to help them. So this was not satisfactory for the student experience generally, and it was quite stressful for all concerned. It was bad also for the support workers, because they were not trained in this particular subject. They had no knowledge of the practical work. They felt uncomfortable trying to help, and they felt uncomfortable with the safety issues as well. The solution to this came to me in the middle of a meeting about something totally different, and very simple: why don't we train some of the older students to help these students with disabilities and act as personal demonstrators, so they help them just with the practical work, nothing else, because their support workers already deal with that very thoroughly. So we have trained students from the year above those who needed the help, so that there's no sort of embarrassment about being helped by your peers, and we have tried as much as possible to use students who have already taken those particular modules so that they see the relevance and they have a sort of wider understanding of why that practical is being carried out and what the sort of knock-on effect of that will be. And that was as far as I could get without help. So that's when I went off to see Val Chapman, who is the director for our Centre for Inclusive Learning Support, and she very kindly offered to train the students, and she gave 2 half-day sessions covering everything that they needed so that they could offer adequate and safe and relevant support to the students involved. And this training included a long list of factors. Basic information regarding equality legislation had to be covered. Confidentiality and disclosure were obviously very important aspects. And this was covered very well, very thoroughly with the personal demonstrators. They were made aware of what they could or should disclose and to whom and under what circumstances. And they all signed a confidentiality agreement. They were also told about the support provided by the university's Disability and Dyslexia Service, basic risk assessments, principles of inclusion and disability etiquette, in general terms, and also specifically for this category of disabilities. Competence standards and academic integrity were covered also very thoroughly. In Val's own words, we tried to level the playing field and not tilt it. So academic integrity was of paramount importance. The students were trained in how to make reasonable adjustments, what techniques and tools to use, what was available on the web, what sort of assistive technology was also available. So at the end of this training, they received a certificate, which is useful for their CV. And the scheme was ready to go. There were some ethical issues which we needed to consider. Students with disabilities were identified by their module tutor. And when I set up the scheme, I approached the 3 students who were involved then. One of them wanted to take up help, and he gave written consent to take part in it. The other 2 did not, and with reasonable adjustments, they have been absolutely fine. The support worker was involved in all these discussions so that she was fully aware of what was going on and how it affected her and her role. And the University Disability Service was also kept fully informed so that they knew what extra help we were providing and to whom. The benefits have been that this has enhanced the learning experience of the students involved. It has ensured that they are working safely, and it's ensured the safety of others, the peers who are working around them in the lab. It has enabled them to develop practical skills which I feel they would not have developed otherwise, and this has increased their employability. And it's also increased the employability of the personal demonstrators, who have just that extra string to their bow now. The personal demonstrators were paid under our Learn As You Earn scheme, so they receive just over £7 an hour. And an additional bonus, which I hadn't anticipated, was the help that it's actually given to the support workers. One of them, when informed of the system that we were developing, stated that she was hugely relieved and that this form of support would make her job far less stressful, as she felt out of her depth trying to cope with all the practical aspects. Feedback from tutors has been very beneficial. One tutor in particular noticed that before the scheme started, a student was getting further and further behind with their practical work and coming in at lunchtimes to try to catch up, but still getting further and further behind. And as soon as a personal demonstrator started to help, that problem was wiped out. Another tutor has reported how impressed she's been by the quality of the help that's been given by these personal demonstrators. The outcomes generally have been that those students who've received the individual help have been able to keep up with what's been going on in class. They have continued with the personal demonstrator scheme, and they have remained at the university, and that was something that I had severe doubts about during their first couple of weeks with us. There has, as I've already said, been this beneficial effect on the support workers. The tutors are keen to have personal demonstrators helping in their practical sessions, and there have been benefits to the personal demonstrators themselves, and Ossie Kasirinen will talk to you about those in a few minutes. Obviously this has to be funded, and so far we've had funds from learning and teaching grants, but the head of institute has seen the beneficial effect of this scheme and is willing to fund it anyway. But it's possible that we may get some funding through access agreement project funding later. We have already rolled the scheme out across the institute, so it's been made available to geographers and archaeologists, and this has been taken up. But it could be used in any subject with a practical content, and it could be enlarged to include other problems, perhaps those caused by medication, for example, students with medical health problems. I have, on the PowerPoint, put my contact details so that if you would like to get in touch with me, I would be only too pleased to answer any questions. Val is here, and I'm sure she will be delighted to answer any queries that you have about the training that she gave. And Ossi Kasurinen, who is one of our personal demonstrators and has been from the beginning of the scheme, is going to talk to you now about the scheme in general, the effect that it's had on him, and the effect that he's seen on the students that he's been able to help.